Well, Gil was, I found him in the back. He was going through reruns of The Tonight Show trying to find new jokes to tell. So actually, I wanted to introduce our next speaker, who is a friend of mine and a true friend of the Family Research Council. We're honored to have with us this afternoon the former Majority Leader from the U.S. House of Representatives, who's going to come and speak to us. In fact, he became the Majority Whip earlier in his career than any other member of Congress in the last 80 years. The late Robert Novak described him as the most efficient party whip in congressional history. The people of Southwest Missouri have overwhelmingly sent him to Washington 7 times, most recently with nearly 70% of the vote. He is now the second highest ranking Republican on the House Energy and Commerce Committee, which is a very important committee on the health care issue. And he is also a member of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. From the Show Me State, please, would you help me welcome a true friend of the family and a hero for value voters, Congressman Roy Blunt.
Thank you, Thank you all. Thank you all. Thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you all. Thank you. It's great to be here. It's good to see those flags waving. It's tough to follow Captain Pete Hegseth, who's done such a great job, not only representing our country, but serving our country. And I really appreciate Tony Perkins coming and introducing me himself. He is one of my great friends. I would have been pleased to be introduced by Gil, but it's an honor to be introduced by Tony and to be here as part of the work that he and the Family Research Council do, to be at the Value Voters Summit at a time when clearly our values are being challenged. But really when that happens, that's an opportunity to show America that our values are about America, our values are for America. This is an opportunity for us. This is a time for us to be more of who we should be. This is a time for us, we've got a reason to explain why we believe in the kind of America we believe in, and we need to take advantage of that. You know, you can't control everything there is in life that you'd like to control. Supposedly at the turn of the 19th century, the end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century, there was a group of British occupiers in a very lush, very quiet, very peaceful, very uneventful part of India. And this group of British soldiers who were occupying that part of India decided they'd carve a golf course out of the jungle of India. And there was really not much else to do so for over a year, this was the biggest event going on, getting this golf course created. And they got the golf course done, and almost from the day the first ball was hit on this golf course, something happened they didn't anticipate. Monkeys would come running out of the jungle, and they'd grab the golf balls. And if it was in the fairway, they might throw it in the rough. And if it was in the rough, they might throw it back at you. And I could go into great and long detail about how many things they did to try to eliminate the monkey problem. But they never got it done. So finally, for this golf course and this golf course only, they passed a rule, and the rule was you have to play the ball where the monkey throws it. And that is the rule in Washington all the time. You know the world is turned upside down when Al Franken is in the United States Senate and Tom DeLay is going on Dancing with the Stars. That's when you know that things have changed in ways that you would have never anticipated. But this is a time to stand for strong families. This is a time to stand for jobs created by small business. This is a time to stand against out-of-control spending. I saw a bumper sticker the other day that said, "Don't let Obama find out what comes after $1 trillion." You know, you've had this healthcare discussion today. People have talked about, I'm sure, $1 trillion, and I'm also sure even my good friends who have been here, and me, and the president, none of us really have an appreciation for how much money that is. None of us have an appreciation for how long it will take our children and grandchildren to pay it back. I do know that on the $800 billion non-stimulus package, that once that money's been borrowed at today's pretty low interest rates, according to Mitch McConnell, who may have told you this, the daily interest on $800 billion is $100 million a day. Now that's one of those numbers, by the time you leave here tomorrow or the next day, you surely won't repeat, because you'll think, surely he didn't say $100 million a day is the interest on almost $1 trillion. And we talk about $1 trillion for the first time and we have to get that under control. We have to have health care policies that make sense. And I know you've had a town hall. I know you've talked about what conservatives like to do. I also know that one of the great misconceptions of this debate is that if you don't want to do what the president wants to do, you don't want to do anything. You know, that is a false choice if there ever was one and is one, and we hear it quite a bit, which is you can either do nothing or you can do what we want to do. Well, there are lots of choices between nothing and what anybody wants to do, and we're talking about those choices. You've heard some of them today. We're talking about the fact that we want to keep what works, but we want to fix what's broken. That we believe that government-run health care really doesn't bring the kind of change. It actually, what it does, government-run health care fundamentally changes more than anything else you could do unless you just totally took over everything in the country. If you want to fundamentally change the relationship between people and their government, the place you do that most easily is health care. If you become dependent on the government for your health care at all levels of society, your relationship with the government is never the same again. And that's as good a reason as any not to be for it, even if it really worked. But it really doesn't work. It hasn't worked anywhere they've tried it. It wouldn't work here. You know, we're for a system that has more access to care, coverage for everybody, regardless of pre-existing conditions, more competition, more choice. That has impact on price. You know, competition and choice equals quality and price, and that's where we are in this debate. And you've probably heard that today. Bigger marketplace, more choices, more individual control of the tax benefit that's allowed our employers since World War II to provide insurance. All those things are things that would have a big impact on the system without much government involvement at all. And over again, when we were in the majority in the House, we sent to the Senate 4 times, I think, medical malpractice reform. Never got on the floor, because there were always 41 people there who'd stop it from getting on the floor. We sent associated health plans 5 or 6 times. We sent we're for more health information. We're for more transparency. There was a study about a month ago about the hospitals, how quickly they resuscitate you if you have a heart attack in the hospital. And amazingly, you actually do quite a bit better if they resuscitate you quickly than if they don't. And maybe even more amazingly, those records are available. You and we should be able to find out which hospital, you know, if you resuscitate, the average is 2.32 minutes, 2 minutes and 32 seconds, you're going to likely have a better result than if you're in the hospital where the average is 5 minutes and 14 seconds. You and I should know that. You know, heart problems were one of the problems I had and I was going to the hospital, I'd drive an extra 50 miles to get to the hospital if it wasn't an emergency, where they resuscitate you quicker. We need to know results, price. There are lots of things that would impact price. And we're for all of those things. We're just not for government taking over the healthcare system, and we're not for government changing that relationship with you and government forever. In fact, on the Energy and Commerce Committee that Tony mentioned I was on, we actually spent a little time, not nearly enough. We didn't have hearings. We didn't see the bill for very long. We spent a little time trying to amend the bill. And so Joe Pitts from Pennsylvania, one of my friends on that committee, he and I came to Congress together. He and I and a Democrat, Bart Stupak, had an amendment. And that amendment was you just maintain, under this bill, the Henry Hyde practice of no taxpayer money going for abortions. And we defended it, we debated it, and we passed it. But the chairman of the committee, Henry Waxman, changed his vote so he could be in the majority that was for the amendment. I think it's the first pro-life vote Henry Waxman ever cast, because if you're in the majority, you can bring the amendment back up. as long as the markup's going on. And so 2 hours later, a couple of Democrats voted differently than they had 2 hours earlier, and suddenly it's out of the bill. Well, if the bill wouldn't allow you to pay for abortions, why are you concerned if you keep it in there? Why are you concerned? And then I had an amendment, and my amendment was just if there's going to be a public option, which I'm not for, but I said if there's going to be a public option, I said virtually everybody on this committee believes if there's a public option, within a decade there will only be one option, so let's just plow the ground. This amendment says every federally elected official, the president, the vice president, all of us, every member of the House, every member of the Senate would take the public option from day one. And on that, we voted not to vote. So I said, well, I've got another one. And the other one is the president spent the whole campaign talking about how everybody should have access to a health care plan just like his. And I said, now, he failed to point out about three things. One was that his plan, just so you know when you go home, this is important probably to know, his plan was exactly the same plan every other federal employee had access to. The prison guard, the forest ranger, the postal clerk, all have access to the same plan. Two was that plan has lots of choices, and some of them you pay quite a bit of money for, like I have a Blue Cross Blue Shield plan, and I could have a health savings account and pay less. He didn't really point that out. He also didn't point out, number three, that there's no government-run plan for federal employees. You know, if anybody knows they don't want to be in a government-run health care plan, it's a bunch of government employees. They know. They know the government can barely run the government. I mean, when the government can't run cash for clunkers, you don't want the government responsible for that ultimate health care decision that somebody in your family might have to make. So that amendment was just eliminate the public option, and for anybody who doesn't have insurance offered at work, they have access to a plan exactly like the federal employee benefit plan. And 5 Democrats voted with 23 Republicans and barely failed, 28-31, but it's out there as part of the discussion. And Lee Terry from Nebraska and I are going to file a bill that has that kind of language in it. If that's one of the options that that we have access to, there are federal employees in every state. There are federal employees in every county. As far as I know, almost every community let people have access to that. But don't throw out the things in the system that are working just to create more choices for people. There's a better way to create choices and make the insurance companies work harder to get your business. And then there are lots of other things besides health care that you're focused on, you should be focused on. The former Miss California, maybe it was here today, the Defense of Marriage Act. There's a bill that's filed right now by a high-ranking Democrat in the House where essentially the Defense of Marriage Act would be set aside. And if you get married under the laws of one state, every other state has to recognize that marriage. And all the federal benefits that go with marriage would go with that if that was passed, and I don't think there's any reason to believe if it ever passed, the president wouldn't sign it. Or the Freedom of Choice Act, the one that candidate Obama said it would be the first thing he'd do would be sign a federal law that eliminated all of the state laws that impacted abortion. Now, in our state, the 10-year-old partial birth abortion law would be done away with. In our state, the parental, in Missouri where I'm from, the parental notification law would be done away with. In other states, whatever you managed to get done in your state would be done away with if the Freedom of Choice Act that the president said he'd sign became the law. The whole idea of that, the federalist in me that believes that states have a place in this system that's important is offended by that. With a 100% pro-life voting record, I'm personally outraged by that. that what's happened in state capitals and what Americans, citizens of individual states, have worked for to happen in their state could just be done away with by people in Washington deciding, well, we don't think those laws should count anymore, and they are all off the books. The Employee Non-Discrimination Act, one that Barney Frank has, where you couldn't discriminate against employees for any reason, sexual preference, other reasons. In fact, there were 60 different organizations, according to the Washington Post, that contacted Attorney General Holder this week. The Post headline today was "The Hiring Basis for Religious Charities," challenging the hiring basis for religious charities. Before I came to Congress, I spent 4 years as the president of Southwest Baptist University, where, of course, hiring was an important part of how we decided how that school would look. You're not just teaching a way to make a living, you're teaching a way to live a life. And if you can't discriminate, as is often argued here in Washington, except maybe with the theology professor, then the Christian elementary school or the Christian high school or the Jewish community center or the Muslim food bank all just become a high school, a community center, and a food bank. Being able to discriminate in hiring if you're a religious institution is the difference in being a religious institution and not being a religious institution. And the forces of intimidation are at play here. Don't be intimidated out of this fight. You know, Speaker Pelosi said in the summer that the town hall meetings, people expressing their view at the town hall meetings was un-American. President Carter said if you disagree with this president, it's somehow fundamentally racist in nature. Now, it seems to me that President Carter, when he was president, got a whole lot of criticism. I guess people were just offended by taking direction from a white man in his 50s. You know, that's not what this is about. And we can't be intimidated into believing that that's what this is about. This is a fight for our principles, and a fight for your principles makes them stronger, and it makes you stronger. You know, that's all right. You can clap with that. That's an important. Makes them stronger, and you stronger. You know, you do have to play the ball where it's thrown in this case, and sometimes it's hard to understand the purpose of things that happen in life. And one of the purposes we can see in what's happening right now is it creates an opportunity and an obligation for you and I to stand up stronger, taller, louder, more often for what we believe than we ever have before. You decided to do that by being here this weekend as part of what you're doing. I'm grateful to you for that. I'm glad to have a chance to be here with you for a few minutes today. We have the greatest country in the world. And the reason, because that country is built on principles that are unshakable as a foundation unless we collectively decide we're going to destroy those principles. This is a fight for who we are. This is a fight for who we will be. This is a fight for the future. I'm glad you're in that fight, and I'm glad to be in that fight with you. Thank you all.